Discover the incredible moment a maid healed a millionaire with an unexpected $1 million challenge. Maria's hands trembled as she polished the ornate chandelier hanging in the grand entryway of the Thompson mansion. The radiant crystals caught the sunlight, reflecting streaks of color across the marble floor, yet her heart felt dim amidst the glitzy surroundings. With each stroke of the cloth, memories of her family back in Mexico flooded her mind. The ramshackle home, the sight of her ailing mother in a worn-out chair, and her young brother's innocent dreams of a brighter future. Each day seemed swallowed by the chasm of their aspirations, a rift that widened with the echo of affluence around her. Maria knew the disparity felt sharper with every meticulously cleaned corner of this estate, each space that served as a reminder of what she was missing. Contented smiles faced her from portraits lining the walls, concealing the pressures of wealth and privilege. She admired their lives while grappling with her own. An unyielding ache for opportunity shadowed her thoughts like the flickering cerulean flames of the kitchen stove as she prepared dinner. The world outside didn't matter. The mansion was her universe, yet it ached under the weight of unattainable dreams. Would she ever break free from her modest paycheck? Would she ever witness her family thrive? Just then, her thoughts were shattered like the delicate porcelain in the dining room when an explosion of voices pierced the air, dragging her back to the present. Mr. Thompson collapsed in the grand library, surrounded by his wife and a swarm of panicked staff. News spread like wildfires, igniting whispers of instability behind their polished facades. Maria watched from a distance, feeling a swell of unease merge with her silent longing. Did wealth shield against despair? Did the chains of privilege bind them more deeply than her own familial struggle? Weeks passed, and Mr. Thompson's recovery dragged along like the autumn leaves falling off the trees outside. He shuffled through the hallways, a changed man, and Maria felt an unfamiliar urge pit her against his melancholic demeanor. One particular evening, after a long day of endless chores, she confronted him with a proposition, a wager she felt was her lifeline, a chance to both heal and perhaps change a life. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice unwavering, "I challenge you to step outside of this mansion. If, for 1 month, you engage in building something meaningful in our community, I'll reveal my hidden gifts. But only if you can do it. $1 million wager for a man who's lost meaning." Her heart raced with uncertainty. Was she losing herself? The audacity of her words hung heavy in the air, and she could feel the muscles in her throat tighten. The echoes of her mother's struggles haunted her. Could she take such a risk for the glimmer of hope? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The weight of their worlds collided within the mansion's walls. As days turned into intense hours of reflection and work, Maria felt the psychological tension rise. Each step they took towards the community exposed Mr. Thompson's vulnerabilities that even he wasn't aware existed. Her urge to break the chains of their separate experiences wove tightly with the forces of fear that paralyzed action. Would he release his grip on entitlement? Would she risk exposing the hope she carried, knowing they could both fail? Yet, when tension crackled in the air, moments spent together led to shared worries, laughter, and simple paintings that mirrored their renewed awareness. But just as the colors of their then unlikely alliance began to blend vibrantly, a fateful day approached that threatened to sever the fragile bond they had woven. What was about to unravel would push both Maria and Mr. Thompson to confront their deepest fears, their unspoken truths hanging heavily in the balance. The stakes had never been higher, and as they stood at the precipice of transformation, both battled the forces of identity and purpose. Would the challenge truly lead to healing or shatter their connection beyond repair? As the drama unfurled within the mansion's elegant confines, the answers loomed just beyond the next page, leaving both characters hanging in uncertainty. Maria stood at the threshold of the mansion's grand entrance, the sun setting behind her, casting long shadows that stretched across the polished marble floor. The stakes felt heavier than ever. A challenge had been laid bare, not just for Mr. Thompson, but for herself as well. As she watched him wander through the halls, still rattled by his recent turmoil, she felt the gravity of their wager press down on her shoulders. In this moment, she realized she was not just a maid within these walls. She was the architect of both their potential futures. Days turned into a rigorous rhythm filled with preparation for their community endeavor. Maria committed herself to researching local needs, uncovering the gaps that even thriving neighborhoods often masked. She felt a newfound purpose awaken inside her, a fire that steered her away from her previous resignation. Each dollar that floated in her mind as a prize was another small hope. Her heartbeat quickened whenever she thought about sending it home. At that moment, it was more than just about money. It was about carving her place in a world where she felt invisible. Mr. Thompson, on the other hand, grew increasingly uncomfortable with their arrangement. At first, the prospect of building something meaningful ignited a spark in him, but he often retreated into silence after brief conversations with Maria. The chiseled facade he wore could not mask the vulnerability lurking beneath. The powerful man who once commanded attention now hovered in the shadows of his own insecurities. "Why are we doing this?" he asked one day, his voice cracking like ice underfoot. "What do you want from me?" "Believe it or not, I want you to find some meaning," Maria replied, determination flowing through her veins. "Maybe you need this as much as I do." His gaze faltered. The challenge of uncovering life outside the mansion, the world beyond the gilded gates, stirred something deep within him. The realization of his past approach to life left him unsteady. She could see it, the internal conflict playing out behind his meticulously polished exterior. Yet with each exchange, Maria found herself wrestling with the dichotomy of their existences. Days spent scrutinizing the plight of their neighborhood underscored the stark contrasts that divided them. Would Mr. Thompson be able to truly listen to the voices that echoed far beyond his world? Could he comprehend the strength required to confront one's own failings? Or would he continue shrouded in the veil of privilege, impervious to the transformation they sought? The morning sun spilled into the room during a confab where they hashed out plans. Maria felt empowered as she shared ideas, instinctively leading the conversation where her passion ignited. But in the glances Mr. Thompson cast towards her, she began to detect more than just admiration. There was a flicker, a creeping doubt about shedding the identity he had held for so long. "Maybe you should find someone else. I'm not the man for this," he muttered, his voice laced with anxiety, the weight of their challenge threatening to overwhelm him. "No, you are the man for this. You just need to face that truth." With each word, Maria felt her resolve solidifying, their delicate bond teetering on the brink. This gamble had morphed from a financial wager into a more profound alignment of purpose and identity. The fear of failure merged with the potential of growth, compelling each to unearth their hidden selves. As they prepared for the first steps beyond the mansion, the tension mounted palpably. The moment of truth loomed close. Were they ready to confront not just the community's struggles, but their own insecurities? Would the tentative partnership they had begun to forge transcend their disparate backgrounds? Or were they destined to retreat into their separate worlds once again? The door to the outside world was ajar, and the echoes of their decisions grew louder. What awaited them beyond that threshold would be a reckoning neither dared to imagine. Maria could feel the pull of fate tightening around them, hiding revelations in the folds of uncertainty. Would they both walk through together, Or would this venture fracture them at the core? The air was thick with expectation as Maria stepped into the daylight outside the mansion. The once sumptuous grounds now felt like a stark contrast to the world beyond the estate's walls. Her heart raced, not only with trepidation, but with a growing conviction that this was the precipice of change, not just for herself, but for Mr. Thompson as well. As she turned to him, she saw the shadows of doubt still clinging to his features. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty buzzing in her mind. He hesitated before matching her gaze, revealing a tumult of emotions swirling within. This was the moment she had envisioned, the transition from mere survival to active participation in life. Mr. Thompson was at a crossroads, a place where vulnerability and strength could align if only he would take the next step with her. "I suppose we have no choice now, do we?" he replied, attempting to sound lighthearted, but failing to mask the seriousness of his tone. As they walked, the streets outside buzzed with an energy starkly different from the silence of the mansion. Vendors shouted their wares, children laughed, and the rhythm of everyday life surrounded them like a warm blanket. Maria felt the stirrings of a commitment beyond mere duty. She was becoming part of the heartbeat of this community. Each voice of the people resonated with her, reminding her of the stories she had read during her research. She wished for Mr. Thompson to comprehend this too, how every small action compounded into something greater. They arrived at a local community center, the heart of the neighborhood struggles, and the first destination of their endeavor. Maria could feel Mr. Thompson's anxiety radiating beside her as they approached. "I don't know how to interact with them," he confessed finally, the weight of his privilege evident in his admission. "You don't have to have all the answers," Maria replied, her tone encouraging. "Just listen, that's a great start." They were welcomed with smiles and nods, the warmth of acceptance enveloping them like the afternoon sun. Maria's comfort grew as she engaged various members, fluently sharing ideas and listening to their concerns. Mr. Thompson hovered somewhat awkwardly on the perimeter, absorbing the social warmth but hesitant to dive in. As Maria watched, she felt a pang of sympathy for him. This world was foreign and a challenge. It exposed not just community needs, but also revealed unhealed scars of his past, scars he appeared too proud to acknowledge. In that moment, Maria felt a deep-seated desire within her to guide him into this new realm. "Come with me," she urged, her voice low yet firm, steering him towards a group of parents gathered around a table. "You have to be part of this." With an audible breath, he advanced, albeit reluctantly. At first, he merely observed. Yet, as the discussion unfolded, something shifted in him. He asked questions, hesitant inquiries that slowly turned into genuine curiosity. Watching this evolution ignited a hope in Maria, amplifying her own purpose. Could Mr. Thompson find healing not just in supporting their plans, but in understanding the very essence of humanity he had long neglected? An hour into their visit, palpable tension began to creep into his demeanor. The questions turned inward. Suddenly aware of their disparities, self-doubt crept back. One gripping conversation with a single father about job insecurity felt like a cold splash of reality. Mr. Thompson's facade shattered, if only for a moment, revealing that familiar vulnerability. I don't know how to help you," he admitted, his voice trembling. A woman near the father spoke up, compassion etched across her face. "It's okay to feel that way," she said soothingly. "Just being here is a step." Maria felt a surge of pride for them both. The act of showing up, that was their shared victory. As Mr. Thompson stood there, caught between his affluent past and an uncertain future, she sensed that this was more than mere charity. It was personal confrontation of their identities. Yet the deeper they delved into these discussions, the more the flicker of potential threat loomed. Would they both emerge from this experience transformed for the better, or would the insecurity of their pasts drag them down once again? As Maria prepared to speak on their plans, the echo of those previous doubts still hounded Mr. Thompson, a storm gathering just above the horizon. In that pivotal moment, she knew the next step was critical. Would they confront their fears head-on and learn from shared uncertainties, or would they allow the weight of privilege and past failures to stifle their growth? As she looked straight into Mr. Thompson's eyes, a troubling thought emerged. Was he truly ready for the profound change this journey demanded of them both? The subdued chatter around them faded as Maria sensed the shift within Mr. Thompson. His willingness to engage with the parents was a monumental step, but the weight of his privilege still anchored him. She observed every flicker of emotion across his face, from determination to deep-seated conflict. It was a tumultuous brewing of internal strife, the battle between who he had been shaped to be and who he might become. "Your silence speaks volumes," she encouraged, nudging him gently. "Let them hear your voice, even if it trembles." He nodded slowly, visibly processing her words. The urge to retreat back to safety was palpable, but he remained rooted for now. The single father continued to speak about his struggles, painting a vivid picture of raw vulnerability. Each word felt heavy, yet in the burden shared, a flicker of solidarity ignited. Maria hoped this moment would fuel the fire of empathy within Mr. Thompson. Thompson, would it be enough to propel him beyond mere observation? "Do you think everyone deserves a chance?" he suddenly asked, his voice wavering yet brave. The father paused, visibly taken aback by the sudden directness from the millionaire. Receiving this thread of connection was a significant act of courage for Mr. Thompson, who for so long had been ensnared in a bubble of privilege where questions occurred only within the safe confines of wealth. "Of course we do, but it's not easy," the father replied, eyeing him with a mixture of skepticism and hope. "Not everyone gets that chance." The slight shift of the father's posture alerted Maria to a crucial truth. Mr. Thompson was confronting a larger, existential query that transcended his previous understanding of privilege. The father's acknowledgement of systemic barriers stirred something deep within Mr. Thompson, nudging him to examine the foundations of his own life. "Maybe it's time to change that," Mr. Thompson offered, almost hesitantly, yet there was an earnestness buried beneath those words that Maria latched onto. Suddenly, amidst the dialogue, an unexpected thought sparked in her mind. How could they translate this newfound understanding into actionable change? She felt a wave of inspiration wash over her. Perhaps challenging the status quo wasn't just about empathy, but also about tangible commitments. There existed a convergence of potential, hers and Mr. Thompson's, intent on creating meaning in a world that often sidelined a very people they were talking to. As the discussions continued, Maria formulated a daring idea. What if they initiated a competitive donation drive, but not just any drive? What if we matched donations against each other with a $1 million challenge? She murmured to herself, letting the notion bloom. Mr. Thompson caught her eye. "What did you say?" She drew in a deep breath, the weight of her plan hanging in the air. "What if we create a challenge that forces both you and the community to extend beyond yourselves? If we can raise a certain amount collectively, then we can play a significant role in addressing these needs, while facing the discomfort of our realities." The intensity of the idea filled the small gap between them like an electric charge. However, the apprehension in Mr. Thompson's eyes told her everything. Would he embrace commitment born of vulnerability and risk? Or would he shy away from this call to action, retreating to the safer shores of indifference? "Maria, that's intense," he finally said, each syllable reflecting the swirling emotions he battled with. She leaned closer, determination radiating. "Exactly, that's the point. We need that heat to move things, to challenge not just the community, but each other." As the sound of laughter and dialogue receded into the background, the atmosphere shifted. The challenge loomed like a specter of possibility, shifting their trajectory. Could this be what they needed to forge a true connection with one another? and with those around them? The possibilities unfurled before them, but the uncertainties remained. Would Mr. Thompson confront not only the challenges ahead, but his past failures that bore down on his conscience? A new resolve flickered in his eyes, a light against the shadows looming behind him. "Let's do it," he said. "Let's confront this together." As Maria felt a swell of hope pierce through the tension that had saturated their encounter, she knew the journey was far from over. This was just the beginning. The true test awaited them both. Would making this challenge public open a door to deeper connection, or would it tear at the fabric of their tenuous understanding, revealing cracks that neither was ready to confront? The announcement of the challenge ignited a newfound sense of urgency in Mr. Thompson, yet it also kindled a flurry of self-doubt. As Maria left that meeting, he found himself oscillating between excitement and fear. It was one thing to voice a commitment. It was entirely another to summon the resolve required to follow through. Sitting at a polished mahogany desk later that night, Mr. Thompson stared at his reflection in the office window. The city lights flickered like distant stars, mocking his hesitation. Would he truly put his wealth on the line, exposing himself to potential failure? The stakes felt monumental, transcending mere dollars and cents. They delved into the very fabric of his identity and purpose. He shunned the drifting thoughts of retreat and forced himself to examine why he had in that moment accepted the challenge. Was it merely to ease his conscience, or was there a whisper of genuine motivation urging him towards change? He leaned back, eyes closed, tracing the path his life had taken. Childhood riddled with privilege had kept him insulated, leading to a reinforced belief that destiny could be controlled by wealth alone. Yet the deeper he probed, the more he recognized that his privilege had also kept him blind to the struggles of those less fortunate. "Maybe I don't just want to participate," he murmured to himself. "Maybe I have to lead." The thought startled him, filled him with an odd sense of responsibility. If he was going to engage, he needed to do so wholeheartedly, not just out of obligation, but to inspire others beyond mere donations. He envisioned evenings filled with brainstorming sessions, stories of hardship, and raw vulnerabilities shared over coffee rather than cocktails. In the following days, he began reaching out to other potential donors, sharing Maria's radical idea. The conversations were both illuminating and disconcerting. Many were quick to dismiss the challenge, exuding skepticism about how a few financial contributions could make any significant impact. Others were intrigued, yet reluctant to take the plunge. The doubts returned in waves. The following morning, the early sunlight poured through his office window, casting a harsh brightness on his meticulously organized papers. He absent-mindedly picked at a corner of a legal document. What if he failed? What if he shared too much? The truth of his complacency, the truth that he was terrified. The thought gnawed at him, breeding hesitation. Struggle sourced strength, he mused, but it could also expose weakness. His phone buzzed, jolting him from contemplation. It was Maria, suggesting they meet again that afternoon to finalize the details of the public launch for the challenge. He hesitated before responding, a flutter of anxiety overriding the burgeoning resolve. Could he genuinely commit? Could he risk his reputation, which had taken so long to cultivate, in pursuit of something potentially fleeting? By mid-afternoon, Mr. Thompson found himself seated opposite Maria in a quaint cafe a few blocks from his office. The air was laced with coffee and pastries, and customers engaged in mundane conversations that felt achingly normal. As Maria laid out the plan, she seemed almost buoyant, casting visions of transformed lives painted in bright hues against his bleak, worry-laden canvas. "Imagine the stories we can highlight, the people celebrating breakthroughs," she said, eyes sparkling, clearly enraptured by the potential. Yes, but what if the end result doesn't inspire? He countered, his voice low and contemplative. Maria paused, considering him closely. Failure is a part of any journey, especially one worth taking. But what if your honesty, your revelation, becomes the catalyst for others? Not every success story is pristine. Her words stirred something inside him, an ember of possibility that began igniting. Could he, in his rawness, offer a more profound narrative? So, if I decide to share my journey openly, how will it resonate with them? He wondered aloud, his voice tinged with apprehension but seeking clarity. You're not just a millionaire to them. You're a person who has wrestled with privilege and guilt. When you expose your struggles, it creates connection, humanizes the disparity, Maria replied. Her conviction pushed against his reluctance like a shoving wave. The thought sat heavily with him. To reveal his insecurities was daunting, yet maybe there was strength in acknowledging them. Perhaps it was time to redirect the narrative from one solely of financial power to one of shared humanity. Their conversation turned to logistics, but his mind flitted between the adrenaline of reluctance and the mounting stirrings of courage. He began to see the contours of his journey not merely as a path through wealth, but as an exploration of leadership entwined with vulnerability. By the time he left the cafe, the prospect of his commitment simmered within him like a bubbling cauldron ready to spill over. He had taken a step closer, not just financially, but personally, toward embracing who he was beyond the numbers. Envelopment in fear might paralyze, but embracing honesty could embody liberation. As he re-entered his office, the external city noise faded. Fading sunlight cast long shadows across the room, sharpening his outline. He realized leading meant more than challenging others' perceptions. It demanded he redefined his understanding of strength. Yet, just as resolve blossomed, doubt crept in again. What if his honesty pushed others away rather than drawing them in? Would they see his struggles as weaknesses? As he gazed out the window, a confrontation loomed on his horizon, one not easily avoided. An ache of anticipation settled in the marrow of his bones. Would he truly confront the fragility of his image, exposing how silence had been his greatest enemy? That painful recognition churned within him, nudging him further toward the brink. The moment of revelation approached, whispering a persistent challenge against his hesitance. Could he make that leap? With a deep breath, he selected a blank sheet of paper and began to write. Would this process be leading to discovery or to self-destruction? What would be revealed in the act of sharing his truth? The blank sheet of paper stared back at him, an invitation bound with the tension of unspoken truths. Mr. Thompson's pen hovered above it, twitching as if reluctant to commit the thoughts thrumming inside his mind to permanence. The doubt was palpable, wrapping around him like a collar tightening with every heartbeat. He exhaled slowly, allowing clarity to pierce through the clamor of insecurities battling for dominance. He would no longer write solely about profit margins or investments. No, this was different. This was about the weight of self. What did he truly want to convey? That striding through the world burdened by privilege didn't erase the human experience of fear, shame, or confusion. It was an acknowledgement that beneath the tailored suits and polished demeanor, there was a man wrestling with his own inadequacies. With each stroke of his pen, he sought articulation, not just for others, but for himself. He began to jot down snippets of his narrative, tales of sleepless nights spent fretting over power dynamics, the burden of inherited riches, and the paralyzing fear of never living up to the expectations thrust upon him. It felt like peeling back layers of skin, raw and painful, yet oddly exhilarating. Each word secured a foothold in reality, balancing the vulnerability with newfound strength. Yet, just when momentum threatened to sweep him away, trepidation crashed over him like a tidal wave. This was not merely a piece of writing. It was a risk that could rip apart the fabric of his carefully constructed identity. A nagging voice chimed in, questioning the wisdom of baring his soul in a public forum. What if they turned their backs? What if his past missteps defined them in their eyes forevermore? He clenched his jaw, wrestling with this internal conflict. It was one thing to share triumphs and a polished version of his journey, but exposing his flaws? That required unearthing the very foundations of his constructed persona. And therein lay the challenge, the moment between courage and cowardice, an instantaneous decision shadowed by self-doubt. In that charged silence, Maria's words flickered back into his mind. The idea that failure, rather than shame, could be woven into the narrative of his success. This was not merely a tale of loss, but a tapestry that showcased resilience through vulnerability. Perhaps this was the crux of leadership he had neglected, the power of authenticity in a world tethered to illusion. With renewed resolve, he pressed onward. Mr. Thompson began an outline, detailing the key points of his journey, interspersed with the lessons learned from moments of downfall. As he shaped his story, a glimmer of pride sparked within him. The act of crafting this composition felt like steering a ship through treacherous waters, gradually discovering that the journey mattered more than the destination itself. His mind wandered back to his conversation with Maria. She had been the catalyst that ignited this internal upheaval, encouraging him to look beyond mere success. It dawned on him that perhaps their collaborative venture could mean even more than what they initially envisioned. What if they made a commitment to work with underprivileged groups, utilizing his wealth not just to highlight struggle, but also to drive meaningful change? The realization sent tremors through him. He was not just a gatekeeper of riches, but a potential vessel for healing. As the daylight began to fade, a sense of liberation coursed through his veins. Mr. Thompson didn't just want to tell people about his triumphs, he wanted to show them what it meant to be human. Yet the faint echo of apprehension remained, a whisper demanding to be acknowledged. What if this journey led to backlash, rejection, or worst of all, public exposure of his flaws? Despite that trepidation, he knew he was on a precipice of something significant. A decision loomed large on the horizon. With a deep-felt breath, he asked himself one last question. Was he ready to redefine not just how others perceived him, but how he perceived himself? And just as he questioned his threshold of courage, the phone pinged with a new message from Maria. "Let's embrace the challenge together," she texted. The simple words suddenly felt monumental, propelling him towards the next step of his evolution. The challenge lay ahead, and though shivers of uncertainty raced down his spine, he couldn't shake the exhilarating charge of anticipation. Would he dive headfirst into the unknown? Would he dare to embrace both his triumphs and failures in this transformative endeavor that awaited him? The sun set softly on the city skyline as Mr. Thompson took a deep breath, feeling the weight of a decision settle in his gut. The contours of his new path twisted and turned, demanding courage he wasn't sure he possessed. Thoughts raced through his mind, each a fervent whisper urging him to step up, yet beneath them lay the lurking shadow of fear. He glanced down at his notes, the disjointed fragments of his experiences and aspirations now feeling like a fragile mosaic. Each piece told a story. Each word was a chance to connect beyond the polished veneer he had previously offered to the world. But self-exposure wouldn't be easy. Could vulnerability really pave the way to a genuine engagement with others? He picked up his pen again, but his hand hesitated. What if they didn't understand? What if he laid bare his soul only to be met with disdain or mockery? As his foresight painted grim illustrations of potential ridicule, he fought against the urge to retreat behind his masked persona. This was not merely about him. It was about the bridge to others he was trying to forge, who needed more than just superficial admiration from someone in his position. Through Maria, he envisioned a means to extend authenticity, a way to cultivate connection through shared, unrefined human experiences. He had to explore what lay beneath his privilege, how the shadows of doubt shaped his journey rather than defining it. He recalled Maria's passion, her determination lit by genuine purpose. It was intoxicating. Their discussions about creating a project for underprivileged groups glimmered in his mind, not just as an opportunity to give back, but as a pivotal moment for growth. This would be an endeavor steeped in the realities that inhabitants of wealth often overlooked: the resilience of folks navigating life without a safety net, the strength in vulnerability he had come to appreciate. Yet, as he envisioned the possibilities, the specter of doubt darkened his excitement. The potential backlash weighed heavily on his conscience. How would he face people whose perceptions of him were built on success alone? What if his flaws, and he was acutely aware of their existence, became fodder for gossip? Abruptly, the soft ping of his phone broke his spiral of anxiety. It was Maria again, messaging with an uncomplicated enthusiasm that contrasted sharply with his internal dissonance. We could start with sharing our stories, create a platform where others can share theirs too, unfiltered. The simplicity of her suggestion tethered him to reality. Sharing was more than exposure, it was an act of communion. This venture was no longer his alone, it was collaboratively meaningful. The idea of wrapping his narrative in the context of others gave him clarity. It wasn't about being a perfect role model, it was about being an imperfect human willing to learn and teach in tandem with those he sought to assist. With renewed determination, he set down his phone, picking up his pen with a newfound purpose. He felt the contours of his story shifting, expanding, welcoming contributions from those ready to share their own battles. This wasn't just his personal journey anymore. It could become a collective tapestry. Just as the ink met the page, a soft knock interrupted his concentrated energy. The moment forced him to swallow hard and confront the world lurking outside his cocoon of self-doubt. "Mr. Thompson?" a voice called from the other side, uncertain yet firm. It was his assistant, Angela. "Yes? We need to talk about the upcoming charity gala and the media implications of your new initiative." The impeding conversation pushed him further into the depths of his unease. He shot a glance at his handwritten notes, cognizant that establishing a new narrative meant standing at the forefront of scrutiny. The road ahead, now clearer in his mind, was fraught with challenges, testing his courage and willingness to engage with what he had previously shielded. As he opened the door to respond, the weight of the impending discussion mirrored that of the choice he had made to share his vulnerability. It was time to confront not just others' judgments, but his own evolving perceptions. The moment of truth had arrived at last. Would he remain steadfast in his commitment to authenticity, or would the external pressures compel him to retreat back into the protective shell he had so closely woven around himself? As Mr. Thompson stepped into the hallway, his heart raced. Angela stood waiting, her professional demeanor juxtaposed with the swirling uncertainty in his gut. His mind flickered from the potential outcomes of the gala to the promise of his project with Maria. Each idea, each concern melded into a potent source of both anxiety and motivation. "Mr. Thompson, about the gala," Angela began, her voice steadying his stream of thoughts. He caught a glimpse of her notepad, filled with details about attendees, sponsors, and media coverage. He felt a tug, a sense of responsibility, yet it mingled with an overwhelming dread of public scrutiny. "Right, the gala," he replied, forcing his mind to align with the present. Underneath the surface, it felt like treading water in a storm. He wanted to engage, but felt the urge to retreat towards the familiar comfort of his previous role, slick and untouchable. "There's a lot of interest in how you'll be promoting the initiative," she continued, her gaze steady. "The media will be watching your every move. If you're bottling up any uncertainty about this new direction, we need to address it now." Her keen observation struck home. What if they uncover parts of my past? Or, worse, what if I stand up there and flounder? The images of his colleagues' dismissive glances felt too vivid, overshadowing the spark of courage he'd felt moments before. "We can craft your narrative," Angela suggested pragmatically. "You'll need to embrace your vulnerability, not shy away from it."
It will be powerful if you can articulate not just the successes, but the challenges that have shaped you. The truth in her words hung in the air. He couldn't just recite the polished tales of triumph like a script. For everyone who would listen, there had to be a heartbeat, a kind of raw honesty that resonated. He chuckled softly. "Where does that leave room for my fear?" "Exactly there," Angela replied, her eyes glinting with conviction. "Fear is a part of your story. Embrace it. It shows that you're human, relatable." As he inhaled deeply, weighing her advice, he realized he was grappling with more than just public perception. It was an invitation to confront his internal landscape. His experiences, unfiltered and undistorted, could light a path for others who may feel equally overshadowed by the facade of success. "It's a risk," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every real connection is a risk," Angela replied evenly. "You have to decide if the pain of vulnerability is less than the pain of isolation. Our society craves authenticity." He stood frozen, second-guessing every passing moment. A wave of determination washed over him instead of retreat. If he could begin to unearth vulnerable corners in his own life, perhaps this was the change he sought: to share, connect, and grow alongside others through his imperfections. "Okay," he finally said, his voice steadier. "Help me weave fear into this narrative. It's a part of my story now." "Let's schedule a time to practice," she said, looking relieved. "You can do this, Mr. Thompson. More than anything, your honesty could change lives." With every passing word, his potential blossomed amid the creases of challenge binding him. As they delved deeper into the logistics of the gala, a thread of excitement began to knit through his unease. It wasn't just a charity event, it was a turning point. Yet, deep within, confusion hovered. He felt the heavy weight of his decision to share himself against the backdrop of who he had been and who he was becoming. As the conversation wrapped up, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was the catalyst for something larger, something beyond the gala. What if this moment wasn't merely about what he would present, but about uncovering parts of himself he had buried for too long? Stepping back into his office, he pondered, that was the true test of his initiative. Could exposing his own vulnerabilities ignite change not just in him, but in others? With that realization simmering in his thoughts, he noticed a notification pop up on his phone, a message from Maria. His hands trembled slightly as he swiped it open, breathless with anticipation. "Let's meet tonight. I have an idea that could change everything." He felt the thrill of discovery race through him, igniting a spark he hadn't felt in years. But what could this new idea entail? The evening sky darkened as Mr. Thompson stepped into the modest cafe where he had arranged to meet Maria. The familiar aroma of coffee mingled with the lively hum of conversation, creating an atmosphere that felt both comforting and invigorating. As he caught sight of her at a corner table, bubbling with enthusiasm, his heart mirrored the electricity in the air. "Thank you for coming," she beamed, her eyes bright with possibility. "I wouldn't miss it," he replied, a genuine smile breaking through the tension that had been coiled within him for weeks. Although doubts still lurked, they were now mingling with a flicker of confidence. What presented before him was a chance not merely to discuss plans, but to delve deeper into the shared journey they had embarked upon. Without hesitation, she leaned over the table, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've been thinking, what if we harness this challenge to create an event that brings the community directly into the conversation?" Intrigued, he raised an eyebrow. "You mean like a collaborative project?"
Exactly. We can create a platform for people to share their stories, emphasizing their personal experiences while also highlighting the critical needs of our community. A launch of sorts, part charity, part narrative exploration. The simplicity and brilliance of the idea struck him. So, we can redefine the narrative from just fundraising to an emotional unveiling? Absolutely, she affirmed. We make it a dialogue rather than a monologue. It would show everyone that there are deeper layers to our challenge and our experiences. As he absorbed her words, a wave of determination swept over him. What initially felt like an overwhelming challenge was now turning into an opportunity for transformation, both for him and for those who would engage in the experience. This could be monumental, he breathed, envisioning the potential impact. But it requires complete authenticity. That's the point. Your story, my story, everyone's, woven together. With every word exchanged, he felt his resolve crystallizing further. He realized that it wasn't just about presenting a cohesive narrative. It was about collaboration, vulnerability, and creating a community of shared truths. An epiphany washed over him. This was the moment he had been searching for. We need to market this in a way that embodies transparency, he said, excitement seeping into his tone. How we're leveraging our privilege to amplify voices rather than drown them out. Yes, let's even invite local influencers and community leaders to the table. Real people, real stakes, she cheered, igniting further enthusiasm between them. In that bustling cafe, what had once started as a precarious wager transformed into something broader, reaching beyond the manicured lawns of the mansion and into the hearts of the community. Then a flicker of apprehension surfaced. But what if we fail to engage? What if it backfires?
No, she said firmly. The risk is in not trying. These conversations are necessary. They may not always yield applause, but they will bring awareness, and that's where growth begins. Mr. Thompson couldn't suppress the warmth blooming within him. Those words resonated deeply, emboldening his commitment to this cause. He realized they both were on a journey not just of charity, but of self-discovery. The vulnerability he had feared transformed into a strength. Together, they brainstormed the logistics, the marketing strategy, and the heart of their initiative, fluidly flowing with ideas that morphed into tangible plans. By the time they said their goodbyes, both felt a palpable shift. It wasn't merely about the money they could raise, it was about bringing lives together, about igniting change in their hearts. The night that followed was restless, filled with anticipation and excitement. The following day, Mr. Thompson found himself at the office, the deep-seated fears nearly overshadowed by the momentum built through his conversation with Maria. He was restless with determination, drafting emails to local media discussing their project and outreach to potential community partners. Once a figure defined solely by wealth, he was now writing from a place of authenticity, a rare perspective blending both privilege and responsibility. As he crafted his narrative, an unexpected clarity emerged, a strength born from vulnerability that rippled outwards. Finally ready, he scheduled a press release about the launch of their challenge, bolstered by the promise of not just financial backing, but deep community involvement. On the day of the launch, as Mr. Thompson stood on stage in front of a crowded community space, he felt a tidal wave of emotion wash over him. The room thrummed with anticipation, yet fear brushed against his skin. He stood before his audience, not as a millionaire hiding behind curated success, but as an individual grappling with complex identities and eager to foster connection through honest dialogue. "Today marks a new chapter for us," he began, his voice resonating with conviction. "It's not just about money. It's about creating a platform to uplift and amplify our community's voice. With every word he spoke, he felt the chains of expectation shattering, leaving behind the intimacy of shared experience. As individuals began to open up about their journeys, he felt connected to each story. For the first time, he understood the depth of healing that could stem from unmasking vulnerability. In that moment of clarity, he truly emerged transformed. His past no longer defined him, but served as the foundation upon which he built stronger connections with both his past and future. And through that journey of exploration to reveal the human experience, he grasped that the essence of life resided not in perfect performances, but in genuine collaboration. Mr. Thompson was not merely a man of wealth anymore. He stood recognized as an architect of change, elevated by the strength of shared narratives and the power of community. This transformation marked the ultimate achievement, not just in financial terms, but in stepping boldly into a fully realized self. As the event concluded, he was engulfed by applause, but more profoundly, he felt an unprecedented sense of fulfillment. He had embraced vulnerability and harnessed it to create genuine change, fulfilling the very dreams he once thought were out of reach. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and be inspired. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Let's keep growing together.